Welcome back to the series. We've been discussing the member index page. In the next couple of videos, we will be analyzing how some of the select dropdowns were created using AJAX and browser local storage. Let's get started. All right, we are back at the index page, and if you've been following this series, you know so far we've been covering this block right here where the member loop and all the data are, and also the sidebar. But you may have already also noticed that this one activity feed, this widget has been added newly, but don't worry, we will cover this on another video. But for now, we're going to look at these guys right here, these drop-downs. Most of them are just static, like availability and the class year. If we go look at the code right here, to look at the location, see it's the theme folder, and then BuddyPress. This is where all the customization happen, and then this is the index file. And these guys are just static, so not much excitement there. But if you go a little bit above, you'll see that the sports, all the options have been commented out. And also go down a little bit farther, location, you'll also see all the static data has been commented out. So anything you see here under location and sports are being pulled straight from the database and presented here. They do look exactly same as the static ones, and that's the magic of the combination of AJAX and the local storage. And how they were all done, we're about to find out. Let's take a look. Okay, we are back at the code, and let's take a look at this specific piece of HTML. Now, as you saw, we have all sports and location, and in some other places, some other ones, I'm also using the same AJAX way of doing things, loading it to the select. But for this tutorial's purpose, we're just going to focus on this block right here, just the location. And if we look deeper into it, we see a class select filter. This one I'm actually using for the styling purposes, and the location select ID is specifically for the JavaScript, so that I can give it the specific location where this data needs to be loaded. And this data URL is giving us this admin AJAX files URL, so that we can use it on our JavaScript to perform the AJAX functionality. Now let's go dive into the JavaScript. All right, so before we dive into the JavaScript that is making these guys possible, I would like to go over the details of the background a little bit. I'm using two different JavaScripts to pull this off. So let's go take a look at the detail from a diagram, and then we will dive right into the code, which will help you a lot understanding the whole thing, because what's going on in the back end is pretty complex. So let's take a look. All right, so this is what's happening in the background. Normally, if you are trying to dynamically load up a drop-down, select drop-down using AJAX, it actually goes ahead and calls the PHP function. PHP goes to the database, and then it sends the data to the front end. It takes a little bit of time to catch up, right? So to give the user a better experience, I took this approach, which is, considering the fact that over 95% of the users will visit the site via this home page, and then through navigation they're going to end up in the member index page. So I've decided to put a JavaScript AJAX file here at the home page. So as soon as the home page is loaded, this JavaScript AJAX gets launched and calls the corresponding PHP function. PHP calls the database, collects the data, and then returns it back to the AJAX, and AJAX stores it into the browser's local storage. And then it's done. Its job is done. So at that point, when user finally ends up in the member index page, then the other AJAX JavaScript file, which will first look at the browser local storage for the data, which is incredibly fast. And now that we have already set up this way, so it will have no problem finding the data, and it will quickly pull it up and dynamically create this dropdown, and nobody will notice the difference even. Now here's other thing to consider, which is the other 5% of the cases, somehow via SEO or link sharing, the user number 2, let's say, ends up straight at the member index page, bypassing the home. So in that case, what happens is the same JavaScript has a fallback mechanism. It's going to go ahead and check the local storage. If it doesn't find it, it's going to go ahead and make the similar AJAX call to the database, and then also write and populate this local storage and dynamically create the dropdown. But that will happen only once, because now that the data is available in the local storage, so no matter how many times either user 1 or 2 or whomever visits the member index, this will always be populated very quickly using the local storage and the JavaScript. So this is the approach I'm taking. So hopefully this will help you understand when I go over both JavaScripts and the AJAX function. Let's check it out. All right, we're back at the code level, and this is the JavaScript that is loaded at the home page, as we discussed before. Just to make sure, this is the one we're talking about. When the user comes to the home page first at the back end, this gets launched. And before we get into the detail, let's look at some locations and setup. So this one is located under the assets distribution JS right here. And to load this script, I'm using a custom function here, which is under underscore function, ASM custom functions. And this is how I organize the scripts, project name dash functions, and then go to the functions.php file and load them up right like this. All right, so let's look at this for a little bit. This is pretty much a regular on-queue script, add action. But something to notice here is that I'm only on-queuing this script if this is the home page or the front page. This is the function that makes sure if there's a custom home page in there. But don't be confused with a is homepage one, because is homepage will look for the blog page. So this really confused me at the beginning. So is front page makes sure if it has a custom home page or not. So that's where we are loading this script. And then the other thing to notice here is the WP localize script. This function localizes this variable and includes this object for us to use. And this admin URL function pulls up the absolute location URL of this admin-ajax.php. it loads up the HTTP URL for us to use. We put it in this variable here, and this ID actually connects this script with this variable, and this is the one, the global object we use here to load up the AJAX URL from here so that we can use it in our AJAX function right here. Just to show where this is located, let's copy this. Let's go to the home page. Here we have to go to the view page source, Command F in Windows, Control F, and if we search for it, right here, the AJAX URL, and this is the URL being loaded. So let's go back. Now we know where this AJAX URL is coming from, and as a type we're using post, and as the data action this would be the PHP function that we will invoke using AJAX. And to track this down we have to come here. Please ignore these other variables for now because these are the ones performing exact same function for another topic or another drop-down, but since we are focusing on this very one, the location, which is this guy right here, so we will just focus on this for now. In the next video we're going to look into this PHP function in detail and the other JavaScript that we talked about here, this guy right here, and how it performs the rest of the functions and creates this drop down dynamically. We'll be right back.